So, hello students, in our last class we have seen theories of emotion. So, in today's class we will be looking at another module known as adaptive and disruptive functions of emotions, and under these we will also be looking at different measurement of emotions. So, coming to the objectives of this module are, that's adaptive and maladaptive emotions, how to understand and also how we learn to adapt, and how we can measure emotions. Now we look at what are adaptive and disruptive emotions are. Adaptive emotions are which are healthy and lead to positive growth in an individual. They are like acceptance, positive reinforcement, happiness, pleasure, bliss, satisfaction, love, and these are some of these emotions. Maladaptive emotions are unhealthy and they lead to damaging of self and others. They are like anger, fear, shame, joy, sadness, self-blame and rumination and guilt, and these are some of them. Based on 2014 study by Glaren and his colleagues, there are 13 emotions and the corresponding body parts they activate or they don't activate. Like on a heat map, increased activity corresponds with warmer colors like red, orange and yellow, while decreased responses correspond with cooler colors like blue, green and indigo. And to create these body maps, researchers hypothesized that different emotions correspond with different physical reactions. They asked 701 people to color in on a body silhouette the regions where they felt increasing or decreasing activity as they reacted to various stimuli. The stimuli they were exposed to were much like what we encounter in real life, like snippets of movies, conversations and surprise facial expressions. The results showed that for the participant pool, different emotions consistently impacted similar areas of the body. A 2018 study conducted by the same researchers found that the intensity of emotions was directly linked with the intensity of mental and physical sensations. In other words, the stronger the feeling is in your body, the stronger the feeling is in your mind. This led them to believe that feelings can be categorized as follows: negative, which is unpleasant, such as anger, fear, anxiety and shame; positive emotions which are pleasant, such as happiness, love, pride, illness, homeostasis and cognition. Very few emotions like surprise are simply neutral. Participants also saw that pleasant and controllable states were more frequent than unpleasant and uncontrollable ones. When a team of scientists in Finland asked people to map out where they felt different emotions on their bodies, they found that the results were surprisingly consistent even across cultures. People reported that happiness and love sparked activity across nearly the entire body, while depression had the opposite effect. It dampened feelings in the arms, legs and head. Danger and fear triggered strong sensations in the chest area, the volunteers said, and anger was one of the few emotions that activated the arms. And emotion focused therapy is based on the idea that there are three emotional frameworks that very person uses to examine and respond to their emotions. One is primary adaptive responses, which are emotional responses to stimuli that gives us a direct benefit, and primary maladaptive responses are emotional responses to stimuli that are similar to primary adaptive responses, but the responses are often dysfunctional. Often these responses were developed to adapt to a traumatic situation, but the responses are no longer needed and can cause problems in a person's current life and relationships. In therapy, these emotions are assessed with a view towards transforming the incorrect emotional response with a new experience. Secondary reactive responses are emotional responses to emotional responses. And in therapy, secondary reactive responses are examined in an attempt to arrive at the primary adaptive emotion being felt and develop appropriate responses. There is one additional emotional framework some people experience, and that is instrumental emotional responses. These are responses developed and usually because they elicit a response from others. These could be used to get someone to pay attention to us, to go along with someone we want them to do, or either to approve or disapprove of us. The measurement of emotions. Emotions are physical and instinctive, instantly prompting bodily reactions to threat, reward, and everything in between. The bodily reactions can be measured objectively by number 1, pupil dilation, that is eye tracking. Pupil size, blink properties, and gaze are analyzed and used to calculate an index of emotional reaction using modern eye tracking equipment and specially developed software. Pupil size is known to be related to emotional reactions. The eye tracking often includes measuring the diameter of the pupil, which is responsible for regulating the amount of light falling on the retina. In addition to light intensity, the pupil response is also influenced by other factors. These factors include the emotions experienced by oneself. To date, studies have shown that pupil diameter increases when feeling excited. In an attempt to recognize 3 classes of emotions, that is positive, negative and neutral, evoked by movies using pupil width was presented. And the second one in measuring emotions is skin conductance, that is EDA or GSR, that is the galvanic skin response, also known as skin conductance. It refers to changes in sweat gland activity which reflects the intensity of participants' emotional state or emotional arousal. GSR provides an additional source of insight into the level of emotional arousal to validate self-reports, surveys or interviews of participants within a study. The reading time is 5 minutes and our level of emotional arousal changes in response to the environment we are in. If something is scary, threatening, joyful or otherwise emotionally relevant, the change in emotional response that we experience also increases eccrine sweat gland activity. Galvanic skin response measurements work by detecting changes in electrical, that is ionic activity, which is resulting from changes in sweat gland activity. The amount of sweat glands varies across the human body, but is the highest in hand and foot regions, that is 200 to 600 sweat glands per cm, where this GSR signal is typically collected from. Skin conductance is not under conscious control. Instead, it is modulated autonomously by sympathetic activity which drives aspects of human behavior as well as cognitive and emotional states. Skin conductance therefore offers direct insights into autonomous emotional regulation. The next one in measurement of emotion is brain activity, that is EEG or fMRI. EEG, that is electroencephalography, the electrical activity of our brain via electrodes that are placed on the scalp. It tells us from the surface measurements how active the brain is. Brain is an electrical system. All of our thoughts, conscious or otherwise, are generated through a network of neurons that send signals to each other with the help of electrical currents. The more electrical signals, the more neuronal communication, which corresponds to more brain activity. The electrodes of an EEG headset can't detect changes in single neurons, but instead detect the electrical changes of thousands of neurons signaling at the same time. The signal from the electrodes is then sent to an amplifier that, no surprises here, or amplifies the signal. A computer then receives this signal and can generate various maps of brain activity with a rapid temporal resolution. MRI, that is magnetic resonance imaging, provides a map of the brain, how it looks at a set moment in time. This structural information can be useful for determining how the sizes of certain brain areas compare across people, or if there is something abnormal about a particular brain, that is a tumor for example, it may be used to examine the brain's functional anatomy. It determines which parts of the brain are handling critical functions and to evaluate the effects of stroke or other disease or to guide brain treatment. fMRI may detect abnormalities within the brain that cannot be found with other imaging techniques. Functional magnetic resonance imaging is a brain imaging technique that can be used to demonstrate neural activation to emotionally salient stimuli. Role of amygdala in abnormal fear or anxiety is also studied. And the next, sphygmomanometer, and this is used to measure along the blood pressure. And the next one to measure emotion is heart rate, that is ECG. Heart rate variability refers to how much an individual's heart rate speed varies. It's clear that when we run or exercise in some way, then our heart rate will increase compared to when we are at rest, but the time in between each beat can also vary. This variation means that our heart doesn't just beat like a metronome, but will adjust ever so slightly depending on our factors such as physiology and environmental context. Due to the intricate involvement of our heart with our emotions, not just metaphorically, this variation is not only reflective of a physiological state, but it is also reflective of the level of emotional arousal that we are experiencing. Some of the first studies looking at the involvement of HRV in the context of emotions examined its relationship to emotional regulation. Researchers showed children a short film clips containing stressful content in which other children discussed a strange man lurking outside their house, while facial expressions, skin conductance and HRV were measured. The next one in measuring emotions is facial expression. Facial expressions are one of the most important aspects of human communication. The face is responsible for communicating not only thoughts or ideas but also emotions. Facial expressions are configurations of different micromotor, that is small muscle movements in the face that are used to infer a person's discrete emotional state like happiness or anger. Ekman and Frison's facial action coding system, that is FACS, was the first widely used and empirically validated approach to classifying a person's emotional state from their facial expressions. Under facial expressions is also something known as facial feedback hypothesis. Facial feedback hypothesis asserts that facial expressions are capable of influencing our emotions. According to this feedback hypothesis, facial expressions are not only the results of our emotions but are also capable of influencing our emotions. In other words, the act of smiling can itself actually make you feel happier. Research investigating the facial feedback hypothesis has found that suppressing facial expressions of emotion may decrease how intensely those emotions are experienced. Emotion is displayed not only through facial expression but also through tone of voice, behavior and body language. Children who have autism spectrum disorder have difficulty recognizing the emotional states of others. Research has shown that this may stem from an inability to identify facial expressions and other nonverbal expressions of emotion. Does smiling make you happy? Or does being happy make you smile? The facial feedback hypothesis asserts that facial expressions are not only the results of our emotions but also are capable of influencing our emotions. According to this facial feedback hypothesis, facial expressions aren't simply caused by emotions, they influence our emotions. Research investigating the facial feedback hypothesis has found that suppressing facial expressions of emotion may decrease how intensely those emotions are experienced. Recently, the use of Botox to temporarily paralyze facial muscles has also provided strong experimental support for some kind of facial feedback mechanism involved in emotion. Havas, Glenberg, Gutowski, Luccarell and Davidson 2010 discovered that individuals with depression reported lessened depressive symptoms after paralysis of their frowning muscles with Botox injections. Findings from this and other studies suggest that facial feedback modulates the neural processing of emotional content. In an attempt to objectively assess the facial feedback hypothesis, Strack, Martin and Stepper in the year 1988 devised an experiment that would hide their true goals from the participants. Participants were simply told that they were taking part in a study to determine the difficulty of accomplishing certain tasks for people who do not have the use of their hands or arms. To this end, participants held a pen in their mouth in one of the three ways. The lip position would contract the orbicular oris muscle, resulting in a frown. The teeth position would contract the zygomaticus major or the risoricis muscle, resulting in a smile, and the control group would hold the pen in their non-dominant hand. All participants had to complete a questionnaire while holding the pen and rate the difficulty of doing so. The last task, which was the experimenter's real object of interest, was for the participants to subjectively rate the funniness of a cartoon. As predicted, participants in the teeth condition who were technically smiling throughout the exercise reported significantly higher amusement ratings than those in the lips condition. Emotion is displayed not only through facial expression but also through tone of voice and behavior. Specifically, body language is the expression of emotion through body position and movement. Research suggests that we are quite sensitive to the emotional information communicated through body language, even if you are not consciously aware of it. And the last one, when we look at the measurement of emotion, is polygraph. Polygraph is the most common referred to as a lie detector. It is a machine that is used by law enforcement to test the physiological responses of individuals to certain questions. Despite its colloquial name, the polygraph does not detect lies, and most polygraph examiners will say that they do not test specifically for lies but for deceptive reactions. Polygraphs are used under the theory that most people do not lie or deceive without some feelings of anxiety or nervousness. This stems from the idea that most people either feel bad that they are lying or are afraid that they will get caught or will be in trouble if they lie. It is this fear and guilt that produces the anxiety and nervousness. When a person feels this way, they exhibit difficult to detect involuntary physiological changes that can theoretically be detected with a polygraph. The physiological systems that a polygraph focuses on are heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and how much a person sweats. Lying is usually accompanied by an increase in heart rate and blood pressure, which is measured by a cardiograph, an increase in breathing rate and measured by a pneumograph, and an increase in perspiration, which is measured by the change in the electrical resistance of the skin due to the increase of electrolytes that are found in sweat. Because of these physiological signs can accompany other physical states such as illness, alcohol, drug use or the ingestion of certain medications, polygraph exams can be inconclusive. Baseline questions are asked during all polygraph exams in order to eliminate any existing elevated physiological signs. Polygraph examination results are not court admissible because they are considered fundamentally unreliable by the court, and there is a fear that jurors would without question believe all the results of a polygraph. Polygraphs can however be submitted in a court if both parties agree to its validity. Summary of the module. So, now in this module we have seen the adaptive and maladaptive emotions, what they are and how it has an effect on one's body and the area it is affected. Also how one's emotions are measured. Learning to manage one's unhealthy emotions can lead to a better understanding and better relationships with self and others. And when we look at it, helping us to manage our especially unhealthy emotions can lead us not only to better understanding of self and others, but also to live peacefully with others. I hope that when you read emotions and when you look at it, not only look at yourselves but also manage your emotions in a better way, because the energy that we carry through our emotions has an effect on the way we respond and react in relation to our environment.